Oh ho ho, ladies and gentlemen, it is a very, very good day today, and for two big reasons. One, I bought a motorized slider, and all of you guys and girls, I swear men watch this channel too. All of you guys and girls know that I love camera gear just as much as I love nerding out on bike gear, and so I'm pretty pumped about that, and man, am I ever gonna overuse this slider. It's gonna be awesome. The second reason why I am so pumped about today is that little bicycle back there. So if I hit this button, oh no, that's not what I wanted. Stop. Well, bye. I think we got it figured out right about there. Okay, now on to today's video. And it is all about the Stamina 180 from a bike company called Pole. Now Pole is one of our sponsors, and I am here to tell you about the bike and my experiences with it, but they're a sponsor, so I will be straight up lying to you the whole, no, I'm just kidding. These are my honest opinions about this bike. There are pros and cons to every single bike, including that one, and we're gonna go over my experiences with it. I had been waiting a long time to get my hands on one of those Stamina 180s, and I had tried one out, one of the very first prototypes to come out of the Pole design studio, and that was back in Madeira, about this time last year actually, and it was really cool. It was a size medium though, and I'm normally a size large, and the trails were also super terrifying. Like, just, I was so scared most of the time that me being terrified kind of overshadowed the bike part of it. Woo. No. Ouch. I'm upside down. It was really cool, but I couldn't wait to try a size large in my size on some trails that I knew a little bit better. So now, as you probably know, I am no stranger to riding pole bikes. I had started riding an Evolink, actually I'll grab one. So 140mm travel back, 160 front, and really amazing progressive geometry. It was really cool. It kind of opened my eyes to what bikes can do. And as most of you probably know, I'm generally riding trails that are way above my pay grade pretty much all the time. And so having a bike that's like long and stable like that, that's what I wanted. And as soon as I started riding one of these, I stopped going OTB every second ride, which I truly was doing before that. In January of this year, I got myself a Pole machine, which is kind of the evolution of Pole's philosophy of building bikes, or whatever you want to say. This was very similar geometry to the Evolink, but it had more travel in the front. It's 180 in the front, 160 in the rear, and somehow it pedaled better than the Evolink, when the Evolink pedaled really good already. There's 20mm more travel in the back on the Stamina 180 than this one, which is 160 in the back. But am I really gonna notice much? So as soon as I got the Stamina 180 frame, I knew I wanted to make things as consistent as possible between the Stamina and the machine frame. And so I took both frames, or bike and frame, over to my local shop at Rebound Cycle here in Canmore, and they helped me swap over as many parts as humanly possible, which was pretty much everything, like suspension and brakes and handlebars and seat and all these different things. Basically, the only two things that changed were, one is the dropper post, because it's a wider diameter, and the second thing that changed, we went from an air shock on the machine to a coil shock on the Stamina. Now that is no small change. Going from air to coil, it's gonna feel different even just with that, so keep that in mind. Okay, so I immediately took the bike out on a ride. It was pretty freaking interesting, I must say. I went up onto a local loop that I do pretty much every single lunch hour, so I know it really, really well. And I rode it totally differently than I ever have before. And what I mean by differently, if you can see, and I know like it's all high speed GoPro stuff, so nothing really shows how it is in real life. We're all pretty used to that. But on a lot of the corners, I was cutting to the inside, and I've never even considered of cutting any of those corners, because they are covered in roots and pine needles. There is not a lot of traction to be had on those inside corners, but I kept cutting corner after corner after corner. It was awesome. Going down some of the rough rock rolls, it was buttery smooth. As you would expect, I mean, this bike has 180mm of travel in the front and in the rear. The combination between that much travel and the coil shock sensitivity and the geometry of the bike, it made a pretty massive difference, and I immediately set some PRs on those trails on a brand new bike that I had never tried before. So that's all well and good, but I wanted to really test it out, and so we took that bike to Bentonville, Arkansas, and you've seen the first video from that, or at least I hope you have, about this crazy van build that we got to drive from Van Duet. Anyways, we got to go and ride some amazing trails. It had also been raining a ton beforehand, and it rained like crazy while we were there.
Yeah, cleared it.
And so pretty adverse riding conditions, and it also meant that we had to pedal like crazy in between the jumps. And what I found about Bentonville is that it's either jumps or pretty chunky tech. And so this bike should feel right at home. Have a look at how the wheels are just glued to the ground unless I wanted otherwise down these rocks. The suspension was set up really, really nicely right out of the box with this bike. Now, I was kind of warned about Bentonville a little bit about their jumps, and pretty much every single one of their jumps has two options on it, at least two options. One is just a regular dirt-to-dirt takeoff landing, and on mostly every single jump, there's also a rock takeoff. And once again, on camera, they don't really look like anything, but in person, it looks like you're gonna just like hit a wall of rock. They look really steep and really lippy, and it just feels like they're gonna like fling you forward. And so before rolling into anything, pretty much every single time I'd have these rock lips in my head, and typically those thoughts would carry through into the trail, and I'd probably be going around most of those takeoffs, those rock takeoffs. But the moment I was actually riding the bike, all those thoughts went away. I was rolling up to the lip, expecting my brain to say no, but it was just saying yes.
Nice. Yeah.
It's like once I was actually rolling down the trail on the Stamina 180, it just opened things up mentally for me, which is kind of weird to say, but it is very true.
Yeah. Woo!
Kind of in the same way, like if you've ever rented a downhill bike at a downhill park and you've not really used to a bike like that, all of a sudden you feel kind of invincible. Like you can just ride through anything, hit the bigger jumps, because you just kind of have this feeling that the bike is going to pick up the slack. And so I found myself flying into these jumps and pedaling as hard as I could up to them. I mean, like the ground was super soft, so I was pedaling hard regardless, but pedaling as hard as I could into these jumps and just flinging myself off of them. Man, it was so much fun.
Yeah. Drop. So for those who have never ridden this style of bike, which will probably be most people, it is like nothing else you've ever experienced. It's really hard to describe, and it sounds fake because I'm truly just so stoked with this style of geometry. It makes for the best riding type of bike I've ever ridden. That's the truth. Oh, wow. Nice job, dude. Sweet. Woo!
Now, one of the things that was really great about the bike, and was also kind of a source of some annoyance on the bike too, was the coil shock. One, I mean, it just soaks up everything. The sensitivity of that shock is just crazy. It's an EXT shock, and I mean, like, those guys make some pretty high performance stuff, so I was expecting that. So the shock performance was awesome. It was definitely a lot more active than a comparable air shock for sure, and so I was reaching for the climb switch when we were climbing, which normally on an air can, I probably wouldn't have done that, especially on these bikes that pedal really, really well, but I was reaching for that climb switch. Now, the really annoying part about that shock was that there's this little bumper, there's this little plastic O-ring on one end of it, so when it bottoms out, the sensitive bits don't mash together too hard, which is fine. But the thing is that the ring, it just flops around loose. It just goes ding, 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 like all over the place, all over the, man, I don't like talking about suspension, all over the shaft of the shock.
Okay.
And I actually thought mine was broken, and so I looked around online for some reviews and see what other people were saying, and it turns out that's just how they come. So that was kind of loud, and especially for me that really likes a super quiet bike, that bugged me. But that's like the only negative thing I could think of, other than the weight. The weight is going to be more than an air shock as well. So anyways, back to the overall performance of that bike. We were riding with a guy named Josh, and Josh actually invited us to come out. He also invited me to come out to Texas in, when was that? Months ago, earlier on this year, for a Texas Enduro race. And at that race, he totally kicked my butt. He was hitting all of the hard features, which were the faster lines, and he had so much confidence. He was just way faster than me. He totally killed me at that race.
All right, Josh, get it, buddy. See you down there.
You got this.
All right.
And so I was expecting the same difference between us at this trip.
Whoa!
He's actually on a Pole bike as well. He's on a Pole Evolink 140, size XL. That thing is enormous. So anyways, I was expecting to be trailing behind him pretty much the whole time and watching him hit all these features that I couldn't. But this time around, it was different. Like he towed me into stuff, and I found I had to give him a little bit more space because I was catching up to his tail.
Let's go.
Let's do it. Dropping.
So yeah, that drop that I hit, like I walked up to him and I'm like, oh, I can totally do this. I was feeling really confident, and Josh towed me in for that one. And then I immediately wanted to go again, and I wanted to go out in front so I could put a couple extra pedal strokes in. And listen to the hang time on this one.
Woo! Yeah!
Now again, I'm obviously no pro rider, so maybe to some of you, you were like, it was pretty cool for me, and definitely was a bigger hit than I would normally do. And so personally, I think a lot of that extra boost of confidence was riding that magical downhill sled behind me, which can somehow pedal up really nicely too. And I think that's kind of what this all comes down to. It's like this bike that makes you feel like you're on a downhill bike, and yet it also handles like a trail bike somehow. It's this really strange in-between thing. Like, it's got super long geometry, way longer than most downhill bikes actually, save maybe Greg Minnaar's V10. But at the same time, it's got a really steep seat-tube angle, and so when you're sitting on it, it feels like a really comfortable, I was gonna say comfortable XC bike, but I don't think one of those exists. A really comfortable trail bike on the way up. And so I think that's kind of the magic of this whole like pole geometry thing, is that it sort of gives you two bikes at once.
Right. Woo! Oh, that was rock. That was sketchy.
And there are pros and cons to that style of geometry that you kind of have to figure out as you go along. Cornering is a little bit different. It really wants you to be super aggressive with the cornering, but once you learn where to put your weight, oh man, these things corner like crazy. Pulling up and over obstacles and things like that is also a little bit harder on these bikes. It takes a little bit more muscle to get that weight up and over something. But again, it's something you get used to over time. I know I have. And talking with Leo, the designer of the bike, it really all came from EWS racing. Being able to hit bigger and bigger stuff and being able to pedal back up again and save as much energy as possible, hence the stamina name. And that's what this bike delivers. Like that's been my experience with it, but it definitely is something to experience for sure. And I think a lot of riders will really, really love these bikes. And they're not just made for really tall people. They're made for every type of person. Like Beth rides one of these, obviously. She rides a size small Evolink, and that's the same size as a lot of size larges from other brands. But with the way they work the geometry numbers, she's totally comfortable on it. And she's like 5'4", 5'5". And what I think of with as far as like buying a bike, like throwing down my own money on one of these things or any bike, is if you look at the trends from all the different bike companies out there, they're all seemingly just working closer and closer to what that bike already has. Seat tube angles are getting a little steeper every single year. The reach is getting a little bit longer. The chainstays are getting a little longer. So if I were to throw money down on a bike that I know could take me anywhere across the world and be an up-to-date bike for years and years and years, it'd probably be that one right there. So if you have any questions or anything about this bike, make sure you put them down in the comment section below. I hope you guys enjoy this overview of the bike. I've been really enjoying it and I'm gonna keep riding it. It's actually wintertime out here right now, like mega wintertime, and I had to take them off for this video, but I actually set up a studded 27.5 plus setup on this bike and it's been ripping through the ice and the snow. It's been awesome. I've been having a ton of fun on it. Make sure you hit the like button if you liked the video and subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you all next week. Cheers, everybody.